So I recently got to play Treasure Planet for the PS2. Been after this game for quite some time, but I never really came across it much. It's not a rare game as such, but more just uncommon. As a kid, I played the PS1 version, which was basically if Treasure Planet was Spyro the Dragon, albeit a little slower and more clunky in areas. I gave the PS1 version a revisit last year, and while I did still enjoy my time with it, it was a bit frustrating at some points. The control was a little sluggish, maps were too spaced out, and trying to collect everything was a pain in the arse. Curious, I wanted to see what the PS2 version had to offer, and happy to say that it really delivered. Allow me to talk about my time and experience with Treasure Planet on the PS2. I found Treasure Planet for the PS2 to be miles better than the PS1 version, and I'd also say it's quite underrated. It's a 3D platformer, but with a surprisingly good amount of polish. You go around a level and do tasks to acquire beacons, and the levels are very well laid out. It's one giant collectathon from beginning to end, and the levels themselves loop rounds, so there is barely any backtracking. It doesn't introduce anything mind-blowing or revolutionary, but it has your usual 3D platforming tropes and put to good use. For instance, some tasks might require to collect a certain number of items, reaching a certain place, or even doing a little mission. It's fun, simple stuff. The main character Jim also controls very well, and I rarely had moments where I felt the controls to be too slippery. There were a couple of odd moments, but to be honest, nothing too bothersome. Every time I finished a level, I was always itching to play the next one. The original voice cast from the movie is also present, so if you're a big fan of the movie, then you'll love this detail.
I've been tinkering with this map device, and I've made some startling discoveries.
What are we doing here? We need to get to the planet before anyone else gets there.
I see you made the acquaintance of your old pal Murphy here.
You'll be surprised to learn that there are portals here like the ones you found on Montressa.
Beacon. Yeah, Beacon. I think I saw one somewhere near a bunch of flowers. They were red ones. No, make that blue. I'm positive they were of some color!
The dialogue itself isn't particularly that interesting, and the relationships with the characters are a tad dry compared to how it was done in the movie, but it establishes enough as it is just a movie tie-in game. I also got a kick out of hearing the NPC's extra bit of dialogue if you hit them.
Away with you, you noteworthy little whelp!
Just try that again, Mr. Hawkins.
Please don't do that.
Some games don't have this, but I always appreciate the little details being added. I must definitely also bring up the absolute overjoyed sound from Jim whenever you complete a task. I have absolutely no idea why he gets this excited over it, but I am all for it to be honest. I think it's great. Even the solar surfing was enjoyable. One of the most iconic parts of Treasure Planet was always Jim and his solar surfer, so seeing that in the game was a nice touch. The PS1 version did also have it, except it was a bit more watered down. However, when going to the PS2 version, the silver surfing levels turn from this to this. Yeah, quite the difference. Silver surfing is basically a race course, except there's a lot of tasks and collectibles along the way. The majority of the time you'll find yourself doing lap after lap to acquire everything, but the way they capture the solar surfing is what sells it. From my experience, I really did feel the sense of speed and rickety feel of the vehicle, so it really added to the immersion. And that pure sound of speed building up on every booster you get is lovely to hear, and honestly feels quite thrilling. The way the surfer controls is also good enough. Yes, it's definitely not perfect, and I feel the drift button would have been nice, but it was workable. There will be times you may hug a wall, but I've found the brake button to sort of drift helps. You will also be putting away your sail with the L1 button to fit through tight gaps, as well as do some grinding on rails. Sometimes you may also find yourself missing things from such heights, but these didn't affect my overall feelings towards the levels. When I missed things, I either turned around or just lapped around again to give it another go. Even the later levels didn't frustrate me that much, so overall I have good impressions for the surfer levels. A huge step up from the PS1's attempt. As for the music in the game, it captures the atmosphere very well. Every piece seems to suit the levels with different themes and moods thrown in. Like, here, just have a listen to some of these. A great score, but I wouldn't say that it is very catchy, so it won't stick in your head for a long time. They suit the levels well enough though, so that's all that matters. It's good. As for the rest of the game, there isn't really too much to talk about. However, if you find that you enjoy 3D collectathons like Banjo-Kazooie, Jak and Daxter, or others, then you'll most likely enjoy Treasure Planet for the PS2 as it's incredibly similar. Like I said earlier, it doesn't bring anything new to the table, but it still has those fun 3D platforming tropes that we expect and love. I've heard some YouTubers say that this game feels a tad too samey, borrowing a lot of ideas from Jak and Daxter. However, as a person who has played Jak and Daxter countless times, then jumping into Treasure Planet, I can personally say that to me, it doesn't feel like Jak and Daxter. See, the main difference for me is how Jak controls in the game, along with a more advanced moveset. Yes, Jak can do a spin kick, punch, and so can Jim, but Jak can also do a crouch jump for extra height, a head bash attack. He can even transition out of the head bash attack to a jump, a roll jump, etc. To me, Jim did borrow some parts of Jak and Daxter, but I wouldn't say it borrowed too much. See, at first when you play the game, you'll immediately be like, hey, this is just like Jak and Daxter. But give the game some time further in and maybe you'll see it as a standalone 3D platformer. I did anyway. I love Jak and Daxter, but now I also love Treasure Planet. Anyway, that's pretty much everything I feel I should talk about with Treasure Planet on the PS2. To tell you the truth though, I've only just scratched the surface. The reason why I'm not talking about the other parts is because I encourage you to go find it out for yourself. And I really only wanted to talk about the parts that stood out to me. This isn't a review after all. The game is also a hidden gem, and a cheap one at that too. Like for real, check it out on price charting. It's not that bad at all for both PAL and NTSC versions. So if you got a PlayStation 2 handy, then I'd say try out Treasure Planet. I enjoyed my time with it, and maybe you will too.